Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode. First of all, I'd like to apologize for a 2 year delay on getting this up and online. I'm not going to be shy about it. The first episode landed on a pretty rough time, and I ended up burning out. Um, so just remember to take care of your health, your mental health, and make sure that you won't be pushing too much on stuff into your own plate. Um, Before we go into the episode, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to mention some things. First, the other episode was almost an hour long, which is quite some time for me, and I'm very much a perfectionist, so that was practically one take. I think I did a couple of edits, but it was still quite too much time coding and retrying and doing stuff like that to make sure I didn't do any mistake. And that took quite a toll on the amount of effort that goes into making the screencast. So for now, I just want to, start doing stuff, going through topics and whatnot. And if there are any mistakes, I'll probably just keep going with them and also be making a lot more obvious edits as I go through several topics into each episode. This is mainly to make it easy to, just start recording and getting things done and stuff like that. Trying to make as much of minimal effort and put as fewer obstacles as I can, as I don't really want another burnout. But yeah. Also, I'm not going to do any fixed period, as in you won't be having a new episode every week on Sundays at 11 exactly. What I mean is that I'll be doing them as time allows me, and I hope to be doing them fairly often, which is pretty cool. Besides this, I've also been working on a couple other things. So there are 3 or 4 surprises coming, especially to the Elixir community. Most of them I can't talk about right now, but I will be able to let you know some news soon. What I can talk about right now is this. So, us at Subvisual are organizing an Elixir conference that is going to be happening next year in 2021. Um, we're still pretty much, just making sure that everything is safe with COVID-19. But if you want any details on what we have now, you can just do the archive install and run Mix Alchemy, and it will give you every info that you need. I think you'll be very surprised with what we're doing and what we're organizing. I'm super proud of it. So yeah, this is like the first surprise. I really hope you enjoyed. The tickets are on sale. So hurry up and get the early birds before they fly away, of course. Other than that, I wanted to talk about a couple of things first. So this is the repo where everything is getting put. So every time that I do an episode, the code will be here, and you can always refer to this repo on GitHub. If you have any suggestions, any questions you want to ask, if there was something that wasn't clear enough, I this is private right now, but it should be public by the time that I put the video online. So I will be opening this repo for you to ask questions, clarify any doubts, like make any requests or just give general feedback. So this is just a way of us keeping a direct line of communication without having to pollute the other repo, which I wanted to keep clean just with the code for the several episodes. The only thing you'll need to do is open an issue, and I'll be able to get back to you. Finally, I'll always announce the episodes when they're up on my blog, so you can just follow this. I think there's an RSS feed if you're into that, but yeah, I'll just announce them here. Other than that, you can just follow me on YouTube while they're still on YouTube. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that. And just as a side note, I also sometimes publish blog posts on this visual blog, if you're also interested in following that. So without further ado, let's get into it. I promised that 2 years ago, I promised that I would be doing the testing on the next episode. So this is what we will be doing. We will be going through the Gossip project, see what it does, what it doesn't do, and test the features. And I'm going to be giving you advices on testing, how to clean up your tests, and how to approach such a different project on this. So yeah, it's been too long since the last video, and of course some things have changed. We're going to need to do some updates. Namely, we are going to need to do an update to the message packs version, and set it to 2.2 at least, because I was getting some issues with it and I really didn't want to spend a lot of time debugging, but I think it was probably about, like the Elixir version. I'm running 1.10.4 here, so yeah. Now, in terms of testing, we're going to go through each of these modules, and we're going to be focusing on unit tests, at least for now. And let's start with the messenger. Now, if you remember correctly, the messenger is a way for us to generate uniquely identified messages. To do that, we have a UID field. So this is a simple agent, of course, but we have a UID field that identifies our node. And then we take an incremental counter and we add it to every message. Every time we pack a message, it will have an ID field and a content field. And the ID field will uniquely identify our message and our node as well, because this UID is unique to our node, at least as far as the UID for identifiers are concerned. We also, of course, update the ID by incrementing it every time we do it. And when we receive a message, we unpack it, and then we validate a given message. And to validate, we check, of course, if it starts with our UID, so if it's a message of our own, because this can happen in a gossip network. Everyone's just sending messages all around. And another thing that we need to do is check if we have already received that message. And we do that here. We have this messages field. I'm not searching for this correctly. Okay, we have this messages field. I can see my VIN because of that keystroke logging thing, but yeah, just got it. Okay, so it's a map set. And it just keeps track of all of the message IDs. So this UID-ID combination for every message that we have received. So if it's a member, we don't want to do anything with it, when we ignore it. And then when we actually want to handle that message, we'll need to update our map set. So this is, in a nutshell, what the messenger is doing. And yeah, let me just change to my alternate file. I can't see what my Vim is doing. Yeah, it opened. I have a shortcut to open the corresponding test file, and with that keystroke thing, I can see my bottom left corner. Anyway, just going to use a xunit case to describe. For unit tests, I usually do describe for every function that I'm about to test. So we don't care about the starter link, but if we did, I would add a starter link 0 here. Let's go directly to pack with array2 and talk a bit about the test that we're going to do. So right now, we want to test a couple of things. We want to test that it correctly packs the message. And by that, we mean that it has the correct ID and the correct content. And we also want to check that the ID is updated and incremented. So a good test would be see that pack2 correctly packs the message. And another test would be to say that it updates the message ID counter. Now, before we go into the test, I want to do a little bit of a side note. So I usually refer to this ThoughtBot blog post whenever I'm teaching or doing, like a bit of mentoring. It talks about the four-phase testing pattern. And in essence, you have a test, and within every test, you have four phases. So the setup, the exercise, the verification, the teardown. It's a really short blog post to give pretty good examples, but essentially we do every assignment we need to do in the setup phase. We do the exercise. So this will in essence be calling the function that we are testing here. And then the assertions, if the last one is a teardown, which is usually optional and we won't be having many of those, but is usually used to clean up after you've done your tests in case there are any side effects. Yeah, so let's get back to our test. We're going to test if it correctly packs the message, but we're going to need to do a setup phase or a setup block. So we're going to need to start the messenger pretty much in every test. So let's just extract that and do it in the setup block. For those of you who don't know, the setup block runs before each test and allows you to add context to it. So I can just do this here, pass along this keyword list, and I will have that available on the text context. Now that we have our test set up, the first thing we want to do is test the pack function. So we're going to be doing messenger.pack. The PID is the messenger, and in the content, let's do like beware. This will be a packed message. This is the teardown, the exercise phase, sorry. I'm not doing a setup yet. So if we do a setup, I'm going to do, let's say I wanted to do, just for the sake of the exercise, consider this here. I would be doing a new line between each phase, assuming that I have another variable here. So if I was doing the messenger sublink here, I would keep these together in all the assignments, all of the steps of the setup phase all together and neatly distinguishable from the next phase, and then a new line, the exercise phase, and assuming that we do some assertion here, let's assume that this is our assertion. Right, and this would be a test in the format of four-phase testing. And imagining that we wanted to do a teardown, then this would be it. Well, we don't have any of this. Let's just keep this like that. And this is where we were on our test. So we have the packed message, and now we want to check if it is correctly packed or not. So let's do directly message packs dot unpack with a bang the packed message, and let's assign that to this variable. We can actually deconstruct it, so and pattern match on it by doing this. Notice that I'm using strings because message packs converts these atoms into strings. Now, what do we consider correctly packing? Correctly packing would be to check that the ID is indeed correct, so that the ID is equal to a certain UUID and 1, since it was the first message, and assert that the content is beware. Now, how do we get this UUID? I'm going to do it in the setup phase. So I'm just going to go here. We know that this is an agent, and we know that how it works internally since we're testing the on messenger module. I don't usually go for calling internal stuff on tests that aren't directly related to this module. So if we were testing, like the worker or something, I would avoid calling agent.something directly because I'm leaking inside knowledge of this module, the messenger module. And if the implementation changes, I'll have that leaking all over the code base, and that is hardly maintainable. Becomes very difficult to add or change code if you have to change 1,000 tests all over the code base because you're leaking internal knowledge. But in this case, let's just pass the messenger and get back the UUID, assign that, and run our tests. So it's failing because messenger.start link isn't available, missing this alias here. So let's run it again, and now this test, so starting on line 13, is running and passing. So let's move along to this one. Shouldn't be too difficult. We're pretty much going to do something very similar and send a message. We won't care about assigning that right now. Assigning to a packed message like that, we're just going to need to check the internal state of the messenger afterwards. Before I forget to pattern match that. And now we want to assert that the ID is 2, so let's just use something like agent.get messenger and get that ID back. Run the test and it's working. The full suite is running and cool. So we got our first round of tests, pretty much a warm-up. Yeah. The next module that we will be going into is the server. So if you notice the server, it pretty much just starts Gen TCP server and accepts incoming connections and then defers that to the gossip module. Now, something that I try to stress a lot to people I'm mentoring or helping or teaching is that over-testing is a very common issue in the software industry. I know that under-testing is an issue as well, but you might not realize that over-testing is too. Because sometimes you're making tests for the sake of it that slows you down, that removes the speed with which you can deploy new things and like ship new features. And essentially you're not adding a lot to the code base. So in this scenario, what would I be testing? If it would listen to incoming connections, that's pretty much done and managed by Gen TCP. By running a test for this, I would be effectively testing the Gen TCP like module, and I don't care about that. I'll trust that that works since it's built into Erlang. And the only thing that might be worth doing is testing the that it calls the accept function, but it's such a small thing that it doesn't warrant a test per se. I would be adding tests just to make sure that nobody would come in here and just accidentally delete a line. So this would be done by the code review from my point of view. And I would avoid writing a test for the server, and to be honest, for the worker as well, since the worker only abstracts the messages that it receives from an incoming connection, so from the neighbors. Whenever it receives these control messages, it closes. Whenever it receives a send message, it also sends. This could be worth testing maybe, but I don't know. It's such a small test that I'll just trust it works. Much more interesting to us is the gossip module, which is a Gen server that pretty much handles everything. And it's where the magic is happening. So I'd prefer focusing our tests on the gossip module and making sure that everything works correctly here, since it all passes through this module. I'm just gonna create the wrong key binding. Sorry about that. My tmux was acting on me. So I'm just gonna delete this, create the new test here, and essentially when I'm testing a module that is a gen server, I ignore these functions because they're just directly deferring to the handle cast and handle callbacks. Sometimes I might test the start link if it's doing complex operations. But this scenario is too simple to warrant a test. And I'm just going to jump directly to the callback. So let's start with init. I rarely test init, but I want to go through that very quickly just to go through some issues that this init function has. So when I recorded it originally, I already had the testing episode in mind, and I kind of let this slide because I find that people do this fairly often. I wouldn't if so. Let's just start testing before I get ahead of myself. Let's test if it correctly sets the initial state. So now to do this, I would probably just do gossip.init, pass along a port. Let's do port 3000, callback io.inspect one. I'm missing this. Let's save OK state and think a bit about what is going to be the state. So let's do assert that what we get back is the port 3000, a server, which is something, I'm going to mention that in a bit, a messenger, which is something, an empty list of neighbors, and the callback that we defined previously. For the sake of consistency, I'm just going to do this and put these variables here. While I'm doing it, the issue with this approach is that we're starting the server within the init. And this pretty much, this brings nothing new to us. We're calling start server, which is a function that pretty much is just supervisor.startLink. And we're calling messenger.startLink as well. Doing this here brings no significant advantage to us. And we could just as well do it in the startLink function. The one disadvantage that this might have, like doing it in startLink, would be if the gen server creation would fail. Like if we, for some reason, couldn't start up a new process, these two would be dangling. And this isn't really okay, but I feel like for the purpose of the exercise, we can handle that scenario. We can assume that that scenario doesn't happen, and assume that we receive a bunch of arguments here that we do. I'm just going to use this. So we can just do like I'm gonna do this. Surround this by args, and yeah, that should be, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so would this work? Yeah, I tried to do a Vim macro, but it didn't work. Let's click something. Right, so it's working now. Okay, we're doing this, we're assuming that we're passing the arguments there, and let's just do the same here. So arguments would be the port, the server, the messenger, and the callback. Let me just split this. So actually, split join does this. Now with Elixir, I added a small fix a couple of weeks ago. and it was annoying me that you couldn't split or join arrays in Vim with split join. Anyway, so what are the advantages of doing it like that? Now, when you call init directly, you can basically inject stuff into the into the state. This allows us to do something like this, where the server is self and the messenger is the test process PID. By doing this dependency injection kind of approach, let me just do PID here, just so that I can pattern match in that next bit. By doing this, will give us greater control of how the tests are run. So in the test for like broadcast or something, I'm going to be able to do just trying to do this here. So in the test for broadcast, let's assume we're testing broadcast here. We're going to be able to do cool things like give it in the state, give it the server. So it's a handle call, broadcast, and whatever. And for the server or the neighbors or whatever, we can just pass along self here, and we will be essentially putting the test process in the middle of the whole flow, and we can insert on messages that are being passed along different processes. So remember that the worker is a task, right? And it uses messages to communicate. The server also will be using messages through the gen server. And of course, the gossip is a gen server, so it uses messages all along. So we now have three processes that are communicating through messages. The best way to test them and to make sure that the flow is working is by putting the test process in the middle of it all and make sure that every message passes through us and that we can assert on what's going in the middle. So I only added the init describe block here to show you this scenario and to explain why I usually prefer to do this in the start link or in a handle continue function. But by just changing the order in which these things happen, we get much more powerful tests and we position ourselves to, like a greater success or easier time for ourselves to make sure that the module is working correctly. So I'm just gonna delete this. I don't care about the init test. I'm going to delete it and we'll start again by testing the handle call for the connect to. And to do that, let's do describe handle call for connect to messages. I usually do this pattern, so describe handle call for connect to messages, handle cast for broadcast messages, and so on. Since we can't just do handle call for everything that goes into a handle call, that would be pretty difficult to read. So what would be the list of tests that we want to run on this? We want to make sure that it connects to the host that we are asking, and we want to make sure that it starts the worker and updates the neighbors here and here. I'm not going to go through the errors because this path is pretty much straightforward, and adding a test for the sake of it when it's fairly obvious what is happening here, and there's pretty much no way that this particular line can go wrong. It's just not worth it to add a test. So as I was saying, correctly connects to a different node instead of host. Let's just add that it updates the neighbor list, and finally that it starts a new worker. Okay, so these will be our three tests for the handle call. The way we're going to approach this, that it correctly connects to a different node, is by mimicking the server. So I'm going to do something like task.start, and let's open the server here. I've split it. Server basically does this, sets a new connection, an incoming connection, receives these socket options, which are defined here. It's a bit lost there. Okay, so we have our socket options. Not going to care about formatting because it's done automatically. And after receiving a new connection, we set the controlling process and then call gossip.accept. So we're just going to copy these two lines and put them here, and then let's just leave an empty line here because I don't want to go into this right now. So what are we missing here? We're missing a port that we're going to start our server in. Let's just do the usual 3000. Let's also have the socket options here maybe. Let's keep them here because they're better scoped to this particular function. And there's also a gossip process here. So we set the gossip process as the controlling process for this, but we're not starting any gossip process. So let's just do self here. And as I said, position ourselves in the middle of it all. Okay, so we have everything set up. What we do now, I'm just gonna close the server and go back to our handle call. There it is. Let's call gossip.handle call broadcast. Connect to. Getting a bit ahead of myself there. Localhost and our port, which is 3000. Let's pass along PID, although we don't care about the form field, and pass the state. We're going to need to mock this state. So what does it use? It just uses the neighbors list, I think. So let me just highlight that. Yeah, it just uses the neighbor list. I'm gonna go here and set the state. I always set the state to the minimal amount of information needed for this test, so that anyone who comes here, like landing on the project, suddenly doesn't get overwhelmed by unnecessary context. Just trying to keep the minimum amount of context they need in a test, and trying to make sure that the whole context is scoped to the test, so that nothing is happening magically outside or any side effects are linking into here. I try to keep the tests always as self-contained as possible. So we now need, this was our setup phase. We now need to assert. Let me just make a quick note here. I can't, about that new line thing, the formatter doesn't allow us to, when there's a multi-line function here, it doesn't allow us to keep everything nicely together. So it kind of dilutes a bit that cool effect that I mentioned about having the setup phase and then a new line with the exercise phase, and then new line, verify, and so on. So it kind of dilutes that a bit, but well, that's what we have. So let's go into the final phase. What we want to check, we want to check that it indeed connected. And when it connects, we'll get to this point. So what will we do? This is running on a task, so we can just send a message to the PID, so saying someone connected, and give it the socket, because it's essentially what the function does here. I'm sorry, the server does here. By calling an accept, it gives it the socket, and we are pretty much mimicking that same behavior. But now we can do this, set receive, and do connected. And let's just ignore the socket for now. Running the test, and it's passing. Let me just do this. Okay, so this test is passing. Let's clean it up a bit. I'm going to do start server with a given port here and just putting everything here. Maybe this PID. What else are we missing? I think that should be all of it. I'm going to do start server on given port. So open it here. Let's try the test again. Yeah, I clicked the wrong key. Sorry about that. So when you run the test again, of course, it passes. And I'm going to close that pane for now. So let's move along to our next test. The updates the neighbor list test. Essentially, the test will be pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to cheat a bit and copy it. We have our neighbors here. We're going to do the same exact stuff, but we're going to save the state, and we get reply. We don't care about that parameter in the new state. And then let's just do an assertion that we have a new element, on the neighbors field. And this is new state. We can actually go, yeah, I was running the test, it passed. We can actually go a little bit further and say that this should be PID, I believe, off the top of my head. No, not really. Not my own PID, but task PID. Oh, well, this is more than enough because we know that it's updating and we don't need to go into deep details of what is exactly in there. I mean, we could do it now that I think of it. And so I'm just going to save the task here and put this here, but maybe, yeah, okay, task, of course. But maybe it doesn't add as much value to it. It's not even a task. Anyway, I don't want to go deep into that. Okay, so last thing is to test that it starts a new worker. Last thing for the connect to messages, of course. And what this is this is going to be a bit more difficult. And I've been giving it some thought on how to test this. We want to make sure that it calls the start worker function, and the start worker function is defined down here and in the bottom. And it does gossip worker start. It also sets the controlling process and whatever, but I mean, these are small details that we would have a hard time verifying. So the best way, since it directly calls start worker, and we have no way to jump into the middle of that, the cleanest way that I've found to do this is by calling mock, which is, here we go, the small project, which allows us to mock some modules and functions. So let's just add that to our mix EXS file. Now, mocking brings a lot of issues, and especially when you're doing asynchronous testing, it can be a big pain. So rule of thumb, if you're mocking, avoid doing asynchronous tests and don't add mocks unless you're sure that it will simplify the testing. Like, avoid adding mocks overall. That's something that I've learned. It caused a lot more issues with randomly failing tests. They would fail sometimes, they would pass sometimes, they would fail only in the CI or only locally or only like this coworker specific computer for some reason. Mocking is like a last resort in my book. But here it actually helps to make the test cleaner. So I'm just gonna import mock and like just do with mock gossip worker, and the start function receives an argument that we don't care about. And instead of that, let's just do let's save our process ID in a variable just send to that process ID, like started message and return okay self okay PID, and we can in this part here in this block we can actually run our test. So let's do gossip.handle call connect to localhost, again the port 3000. So let's start our server there, start server at port and say the port there. Here. Now, what are we missing? We are missing PID and the state. So let's define our state. What does it need? I think it's just the neighbors. Again, cheating here by copying and pasting. Oops, jumped a bit too much. Yeah. So let's then assert that we have received, or that we will receive a started message. Forgot to add the pane. Yeah, so by testing it, we get the test passing. We have 3 tests running, no failures. And, like looking at this, mocking actually helped quite a bit in making sure that this is readable and that it's easy to test and it's easy to understand what is happening here, especially because the override to the start function is straightforward and is kept here. But again, I can only appeal to you not to overuse mocking because it can get really complex really fast, and it can bring you more harm than good. From personal experience, I've had projects where I did this too early. I didn't really need to do it. It was just, just so easy to reach into mocks and doing a simple mock for something. And then eventually, as features got added, as the project grew, it became really difficult to test. And at one point, I decided to take an afternoon off and just, like redo the whole test suite because of the workarounds that we built around having to mock a bunch of modules. Right, so I'm just gonna take a short break here because I'm in desperate need of water. And yeah, I'm gonna do a small transition there and start again soon for the handle cast accept function. Okay, let's keep going with our tests. So we're moving to handle cast accept now. Oh, sorry, handle cast broadcast. I was missing that one. Okay, so should be a fairly straightforward couple of tests. So we're essentially trying to make sure that it sends a message to all neighbors, which is this do broadcast, mapping over each neighbor and sending a send message to it. And we can test this by adding a describe handle cast for broadcast messages. Let me just move up here. There we go. And the test we're going to do is to check that it sends a message to every neighbor worker. So it's sending this send message is actually sent to the associated worker module, which will receive it into gentcp.send. And here we go. Here we are, broadcast. Sorry about that. Okay. So let's just we're going to need a state, right? So that state is just a list of neighbors. And these neighbors will have a single entry, which is the PID, and PID will be self. And we could, like test that it correctly packs the message, but that would be essentially testing messenger.pack, and we already did that in the correct module. So let's just do that, and then do gossip.handle cast for broadcast. As for our message, let's just do beware again. So that would be message here. Then we just need to send out the state, and we can assert that we receive send, and then a packed message, which we don't really care about. We just want to make sure that we receive this. The fact that the message is packed is secondary. Oh, of course, we also need that messenger key. You can see the error here. So let's actually do, I need to add the, I had a branch on split join, adding this the split and join for the maps in Elixir, but I haven't gotten around to update it and make a pull request yet, which is kind of frustrating to me, wanting to do that and not having much time. So let's just add the messenger and give it the PID just the same. Yeah, so it's going to call our own PID. Yeah, I was thinking like this PID won't work because messenger.pack would call the agent with it. So let's just start a messenger. There's no issue in that. Just simple agent after all, and give the messenger here, and then rerun the test. So we're erroring on undefined function messenger.startLink, and that is because I haven't aliased it. Okay, of course, I also made a mistake here. Taking that break really broke my flow. Sorry, folks. So yeah, this test is passing. That takes care of handle cast for broadcast messages, and now I'm missing the strings here. So let's do accept messages. Right, so accept is called when someone has connected to our socket, so another node connected to our socket, and we need to add it to the neighbors list. We're going to need to make sure that the worker is started, so basically the same test as before, yep. And we're going to need to check that it updates the neighbors list. So let's do starts a worker for the new. I want to call it new socket, but the new node. And we're essentially going to do this test. So I'm going to copy all of it, but we won't do all of it because we'll need to, I think there will be some restrictions, like off the top of my head. So we set the KD, the port, the server, and so on. We don't need anything for the except the neighbors. And this handle call is actually a handle cast, accept, and we need a socket. Okay, so how do we get the socket? We have a server set up, right? And someone connected to it. So I think we can get the socket by doing what the worker does, what the server does, I mean. We get that socket from there, and then in here we do, this will be in the connection, where is it? Sorry folks, connection, TCP connect, it's on connect to, yeah, here it is. So we can just do this ourselves and get okay socket back. So let's do gen TCP dot connect to localhost, give it the port, is this, there we go. Give it the port and empty list of options. Okay, so now this accept has a typo, and socket here, this won't be needed. Let's check if it works, just like, yeah, it does. Okay, so just to recap, because this was quite a bit of information, and in a short period of time, what we have here is that we're starting a server and connecting to it because we want to mimic the behavior of someone connecting to us. So we know that we have a server locally listening, and we need to mimic someone connecting, which is this line right here. And then we mock, we know we want to check if it starts the worker right. So we do that mock thing where we mock the start function and then send a message to ourselves to the test process, and then, just like that. And we assert that we have received the started message. The other test that we're going to do is this right? No, yeah, okay. I was checking if I was within the describe tag. The describe function, I mean. So we want to check that all the neighbors, here we go, are updated. So updates the stage with the new neighbor. So we're going to have to copy this. We still need this part to mimic this behavior, these events happening. I could, like extract this. I'm thinking if I should do it. I don't think I will, just to keep the context with it all contained within the same test. This is like wanted duplication, that the fact that it actually helps us to have some of these things duplicated and not, somewhere else in the code base on the top that will make us, just jump around between parts of the file. Anyway, we do this. I'm going to keep this with mock part just because I don't want workers to start, and I don't want that process running, but I'm just going to simplify this bit. I'm just going to simplify this here as well. Take this out. And now we want to check, we don't want this isn't happening. We want to save here the no reply new state variable in gossip. So you can see that there. And then we will want to assert that new state will have a new neighbors list. I'm sorry, neighbors. And I think this will be PID. I don't want to fall into the same trap from before. Oh no. Oh boy, my event got stuck. Yeah, this is awesome. Okay. So what we use humux and do heal pane ht, I think 1. Maybe it is 0, heal pane 0. There we go. Okay, sorry about that, folks. So we were doing gossip test and we were way down here. Let me just open the gossip file here, get it down there, broadcast. Yeah, here we go. So we're here, we're missing the assert, and we want to assert that the neighbors are, I think that will be PID. I think this time I got it right. And that this equals to the new state. So I run the test, and it passes. So yeah, it actually equals PID, and this is doing what we are expecting. Finally, let's go into describing handlecast for receive messages. And what handlecast is doing is that it is unpacking a messenger. So we know that in our test, we'll have to start a messenger. And if the message isn't nil, we're going to call the callback and broadcast it to our neighbors. And this is the important part. These two lines will be the two tests that we want to add here. So we want to test that it calls the callback, and we want to test that it broadcasts the message to the neighbors. To test the callback part, let's use a similar strategy, which is we will be putting a callback that sends a message to ourselves. So let's do callback equals a function that will receive some message, and let's send, I'm going to save the PID here, send to the PID the callback and pass along the message we just received. We'll also need to start Messenger, right? So messenger.start link. Oops, need to save this into the correct variable, and let's create our state, which will be an empty list of neighbors. That messenger, and I don't think there's anything else we need. So we call the messenger here and we call the neighbors here, and that's it. So let's keep that as our state. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. And now let's do gossip.handle cast receive input message as beware of the software. Getting pretty tired of that simple beware placeholder. Okay, so we need this, we send the state. Now we don't care about what is returned because there are no updates or anything like that whatsoever. So let's assert that we receive this callback, and I'm just going to ignore the message because it's going through, it's going to be unpacked and so on. So I actually need to pack this, right? So let's do, the message can't just be this simple string because we need to, it unpacks it here. So instead of doing that, let's do, put this as content, and the ID is 123-1, and pack this into message packs, pack. Okay, so now we will receive the unpacked message, and I think we can put here, or was it beware of the software? That's right. Let's test it. Okay, so I have some errors. Let's check that. Callback is in use, of course. And again, the same issue as I'm doing gossip dot. I'm actually wondering why if there are compilation errors here. No, okay, so I ran the test again and it worked. Let's test the final one, just to wrap things up quickly because this has taken quite a bit of time now. We want to test if it broadcasts to the neighbors. So what we want from our neighbors list, I'm going to copy this because it has a lot of important context that we need to repeat. What we want as our neighbors is basically the PID here. So instead of everything will be the same, we're going to set the same callback. Actually, we don't need to set the same callback, but let's just keep it because of copy pasting issues. We can do, we start the messenger, and we save our own process, the test process, as the only neighbor. What it means now is that it will go through the neighbors list and send message to it with the packed message. So we're going to do a subreceive send and ignore it because it's packed. And I'm going to check if we can change that. So this is obviously working. I'm going to check if we can do this pattern match here by pinning that. Yeah, it works. So yeah, right now if we run the whole test suite, so it runs mixed tests, 10 tests, 0 failures. We tested, like this main gossip. Let me get rid of that. We tested this main gossip module where everything is happening. We tested this messenger module, and we skipped both of these because in essence we would be testing the framework used, so I can just remove it. But in this case it isn't the framework, but testing like GNTCP directly. The amount of logic that is happening here, it's a fair amount, but not any that would warrant unit testing. So yeah, you could make a case for testing this, I think, but it's just simple logic that I'm not going to get into that. So to repeat everything, like what I said in the beginning, the code will be available here. Hopefully I'll be adding a third episode fairly sooner, for sure sooner than 2 years. And the code will be available here. This is the branch I'm working on. It already has um, everything that I did, or at least a couple of things that I did. I was doing some dry runs before. This video will be available on a new website fairly soon. I've been working it on my downtimes, which, to be honest, aren't that many. And if you need anything, the repo for the community will be BOTS, or bots community. And just create a new issue. Like, if ask any questions, if I left something unanswered, if you're wondering why I did X or Y or whatever, if you have any suggestions. And I really hope you enjoyed this. I've been enjoying, and I've been, like thinking about getting back to doing screencasts for quite some time, and just didn't have the guts to pull the trigger and do it again. So yeah, I think next episode will be around probably Gen servers, either Gen servers and what's happening behind the scenes. And this will be for more of a beginner style screencasts, or I'll keep going to distributed systems and do something like uh, vector clocks and Lamport clocks and stuff like that. Hopefully, these will be much shorter than this one, which by my calculation should be over an hour now. Um, yeah, so thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again on the next episode.